Richard Haas, welcome back to the program. I just wonder whether there was anything you heard from Mr. Colby as to the, future nature of a Trump administration in various foreign policy aspects that you wanted to comment on.
No, I think he's understandably and properly being quite careful not to get out in front of the president-elect or the next administration. So again, I think what a President Trump would do, whether it's vis-a-vis China or Ukraine, the Middle East, remains to be seen. And you couldn't glean a whole lot from what Bridge Colby had to say.
Can I ask you for your opinion then on Pete Hegseth as the next defense secretary? Do you agree with the people who've said he's the least qualified in American history?
I've never met the gentleman. What worries me, Kристиан, is he has no experience running an organization. He served, which is, obviously a very good and honorable thing, but he hasn't worked in the Washington decision-making world. Pentagon's an enormous management challenge, both the building, the interagency process, as well as the American troops scattered around the world. So I worry about that, the lack of that background. I also worry about the politicization of the military. This talk about creating some kind of a special group, a warrior group, to vet existing admirals and generals. I worry about that. This talk about potentially using the U.S. military, a lot of people are concerned about this, under the Insurrection Act to deal with disturbances that, for example, could stem from an effort to deport many individuals. So I'm worried that we potentially are having someone as Secretary of Defense who simply comes to things quite politically and doesn't have the management background. That said, if he gets confirmed, we'll just have to see, and we'll see how well or he does, and we'll take it from there.
Can I then play just a quick soundbite from Mike Huckabee? He spoke to Israel Radio today, and he basically said annexation is on the table again. Here we go.
I think Israel has title deed to Judea and Samaria. There are certain words I refuse to use. There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation.
So that is him in 2017 talking about those issues. Today, he told Israel Radio that annexation was back on the table. Break that down and what it means.
Look, annexation, I think, would be a disaster, not just for Palestinians, who would lose any chance of having a country of their own, but it would be a disaster for Israel. If you're truly supportive of Israel, you should want Israel to be a secure, prosperous, Jewish and democratic country with robust ties to the West. Annexation puts all of that at risk. So I really don't see that in any way as an Israel self-interest or in the interest of a close U.S.-Israeli relationship. I would hope Ambassador to be Huckabee, as he gets more involved with the issues, would come to rethink some of those positions. That would also make it impossible for Israel to forge lasting relationships in the Arab world. Again, on my short list of counterproductive things, Kристиан, annexation of the land, well, what is the West Bank? Annexation of any of that land, absent a much larger peace agreement where there's compensation in terms of territory and the like. But just simply isolated annexation would be dramatically against the self-interest of both this country and Israel.
And let's move to Gaza, where there's a big report in Haaretz that suggests the Israeli forces are going to be there at least through 2025 and maybe longer. And the whole business of kind of building an infrastructure in northern Gaza has been seen and investigated. Roads and places where they'll build military infrastructure there. And Donald Trump has told Benjamin Netanyahu to, quote, do what you have to do to, quote, finish the job. In Israel, in Lebanon, or what? How do you read that? It's clear that he wants this over by the time he's inaugurated.
Well, I fear it won't be over, but it should be over. Right now, there's extraordinary opportunity in the Middle East. In Gaza, if Israel would simply, among other things, agree to a ceasefire, not only would it have a chance of getting the hostages back, but if it coupled that with some sort of a commitment to a Palestinian political entity or state, what have you, I think then you could bring an Arab stabilization force into Gaza. You could create order there. Hamas would not be able to reemerge. You wouldn't need an Israeli occupation. This seems to me to be so much in Israel's interest, and the opportunities there. The Arab states are willing to do it, and then you could rebuild. So it would be a political, a strategic, an economic, and a humanitarian gain. In Lebanon, Israel has delivered a decisive blow against Hezbollah. So I would say let's build on that. Let's get a ceasefire. Let's get those 60 or 70,000 Israelis back in their homes in northern Israel, and let's create the basis for a long-term ceasefire. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of the rebuilding of a modern state of Lebanon. Let's stop the settlement activity, which I think precludes or closes off potential for diplomacy in this part of the world. Hopefully the Iranians won't take another step against Israel, and then we can maybe calm the Israeli-Iranian relationship for a time. So I actually think Mr. Trump comes to office, potentially, with extraordinary opportunity. But that opportunity will only be harvested not if the Americans give the Israelis a free hand to do anything and everything, but if we press Israel to basically, let's bring about a ceasefire in Gaza, let's bring about a ceasefire in the north, and let's begin a political process. We're not talking about a Palestinian state tomorrow or next week or next year, but let's at least begin a political process that, among other things, would allow an Arab stabilization force to enter Gaza.
I mean, I wonder if you can see that even remotely possible, you know, given who's in charge in Israel and the ideological backers of Netanyahu who really don't want any of that and have already said that Trump's election should be, you know, our green light to go and finish the sort of the settlement project and all of the rest of it. I mean, they're very keen on that. They think they have a strong ally based on what he did for them last time. But I want to ask you why you think Israel doesn't capitalize on what you've just said, that it has dealt real devastating blows to Hezbollah and Hamas, and seems to be playing a terribly deadly game of whack-a-mole in northern Gaza, just back and forth, and you know, pockets of Hamas being attacked by the air, and again, tens and hundreds of civilians, children being killed on a daily basis. Why doesn't Israel see that it's winning and stop now?
Look, Israel is winning militarily, but it's not winning politically because it hasn't introduced the political component into its policy. We're up against diminishing returns in Gaza. As you're bombing rubble, or in some cases, as you say, whack-a-mole. Hamas is reemerging in certain areas. Look, then you're into assessing or analyzing the motivations of Israel's prime minister and some of those around them. Some of those around them clearly do want to annex land. They want to annex parts of the West Bank. They want to stop forever the emergence of a Palestinian state. They want to resettle parts of Gaza. The prime minister, I believe, clearly prefers remaining a war prime minister, which, among other things, puts off any investigations into why October 7th was allowed to happen. He doesn't want to split his coalition. So people have all sorts of motives for continuing these conflicts. But again, it's up to President Trump to press, if he wants to, something different. I'll tell you, I had breakfast as recently as yesterday with an Israeli, and he said there's some people in the Israeli government who are uneasy with President-elect Trump simply because he's so unpredictable. And, you know, the Biden administration, we knew what its preferences were, but it really didn't put much behind them. So it constantly criticized, you know, the Israeli government and has virtually nothing to show for it, to be perfectly blunt. I think a President Trump at least has the potential, if he wants, to get on the phone to Bibi Netanyahu and basically say, Bibi, this is what you've got to do. You're going to have to work with me for the next 4 years. This is what I want and need from you.
We're going to see if past his prologue, etc. We'll just see. Thank you so much, Richard Haas.